Alright guys, so the last video was a little on the negative side of things, so to make up for that, allow me to talk about something that doesn't totally make me angry. Well, at least not all the time. Anyway, let's talk about gaming. There are a lot of good games coming out in 2024 that I'll probably only really play in like 2025 once they start going on sale, but even still, I'm looking forward to their releases and seeing if they live up to the hype. I've narrowed this list down to 5 games that I might actually buy at full price if they deliver on the hype that they've built up throughout the years. So let's dive into my top 5 most anticipated game releases, shall we? Alright, so even though I still haven't gotten a chance to beat the Pillars of Eternity games, Avowed sounded too cool to not be on this list. It's set in a unique fantasy world called Aeor that has tons of cool lore and interesting locales to explore. While that description probably makes it sound a bit like a Skyrim clone, and the trailer footage also kinda gave off the Skyrim clone vibe, just know that it's being developed by Obsidian Entertainment, who is a pretty great studio with a solid track record for good games. So I have faith that they'll be able to pull this game off. Plus, the last time they cloned a Bethesda game, they made Fallout New Vegas, which is widely considered to be one of the best video games ever made. So I think I'm safe in my excitement for this game. I am interested to know if the main character / player character is going to be a watcher like they are in the Pillars of Eternity games, or if this is going to be a more linear adventure style game where we take on the role of someone who is already established in the Pillars of Eternity universe, like how Adam Jensen in Deus Ex games is, or like Geralt from the Witcher games. I doubt that's going to be the case because Obsidian mainly makes RPG games, and everything I've heard about this game seems to imply that it's going to be an RPG game. But then again, there's not a lot of information about this game other than the fact that it's coming out in 2024, which is part of the reason why it's so high up on this list. Usually I don't put too much stock in fan favorite developers that gamers hype up and put on a pedestal and act like they can do no wrong, at least not since CD Projekt Red burned me with the Cyberpunk release. But in Obsidian's case, they've made some of the greatest RPG games of all time. Like I already said, Fallout New Vegas is one of them, but they also developed KOTOR 2, which is just an amazing RPG set in the Star Wars universe. Plus, they were founded by former developers at Black Isle Studios, the people that created Fallout 1 and 2, and everyone from Black Isle that didn't join Obsidian is currently at inXile Studios, which is also a studio owned by Microsoft. So basically what this tells me is that 1. Obsidian Entertainment, the people behind major famous franchises that I myself am a fan of, are going to be working on Avowed, and are surrounded by other studios that could potentially help them that are also filled with some of the same people that made great game franchises that I love. That's about as much confirmation as I can hope for from the games industry that this game is going to be good, or at the very least decent, because it's being made by people who have made successful games before. For as much hype as something like No Man's Sky got, I always suspected it wouldn't be all that, because I had never heard of these people before, and they were talking about making this super big ambitious game, which usually isn't a good sign, and wouldn't you know it, it wasn't a good sign at the time. And thankfully that isn't the case with Obsidian. These guys have all proven they can make big ambitious game franchises despite having very few resources or time. So imagine what they could do with those said resources and with a lot of time to develop something great, and with a franchise they themselves already handcrafted and created that they know intimately inside and out. Like I said, that's pretty much all the confirmation I need that this game is going to be good, so I'm definitely looking forward to buying this day 1 on release. Assuming of course that it lives up to all this hype, but I have faith it will. Now let's move on to the next game I'm eagerly waiting for in 2024, The Axis Unseen. Alright, so I first saw this game in a no-clip documentary featuring its creator, and it sounded really interesting to me. It's made by a former Bethesda veteran, who left the company after some of the controversy surrounding Fallout 76 and Starfield, for reasons that are blindingly obvious for anyone who's heard about those controversies. Anyways, it's a game set in a fictional universe where the player hunts mystical beasts from real-life folklore, and a few that seem to have been specifically created for this game. It seems like you, the player character, can find notes from previous hunters and create special arrow types in order to help you beat the various monsters you're going to be hunting. From what I could tell from the no-clip documentary, this game sounds like it's going for a bit of a Witcher 3 kind of vibe, where you, the player, is acting as a kind of monster hunter and reading up on all the monsters' weaknesses in-game and preparing to take them on with it. Except this game will revolve entirely around that mechanic, whereas The Witcher 3 had a lot more going on in it besides the monster hunting, especially on lower difficulties, where you really didn't even need to worry about preparing for certain enemies. The Witcher 3 is one of the games that really got me into gaming, so obviously this game being like that one sounds interesting to me. And on top of all that, this game also seems to be going for a horror vibe, with you being the only hunter around and having to avoid some of the monsters you're not prepared for early on, whilst exploring this hauntingly beautiful world that is a great visual aesthetic. Really, the only reason why this game isn't higher, or I guess technically lower on this list, is because the Steam release says 2024, but all of what I just said sound like it'd be way too much for just one guy. Now, yes, in the no-clip documentary, the developer states that this engine has actually been a lot easier to work with, and that's why he's been able to make so much progress on the game. But even still, I'm not sure 2024 is a realistic deadline. But hey, the developer says it's coming out in 2024, and the Steam page says that too, so I'm gonna cross my fingers and pray that this actually does manage to come out in 2024, because it sounds really interesting to me, and I'm really interested to see what this lone former Bethesda developer made of this game. Now let's move on to the next game I'm super excited for, Black Myth Wukong. Okay, so even though I'm not really a fan of Souls-likes, or even really Souls games in general, this game just looks too incredible for me to not be hyped over. Graphically, of course, it's obvious that it looks really cool, and the combat seems to be really fluid, but what really caught my eye was some of the abilities you can use, and the fact that you have to use them in tandem with the rest of your abilities during a fight. I know that probably sounds like a small thing to be excited about, but honestly, one of my biggest complaints with many other Souls games and Souls-likes are that the magic abilities always just seemed like an afterthought, or were never as fun as just fighting the enemies with a weapon by utilizing the dodge parry mechanic within said games. However, in this game it looks like that's not going to be the case, and I'm really curious to see how they fix this issue that many other Souls-likes suffer from. Another reason I'm hyped for this game is because the story of this game is supposed to be based on the Journey to the West, which is a famous Chinese folktale dating back to the 16th century, and was the inspiration for Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball. So there's a lot of cool lore this game could pull from, or it could decide to go in its own unique direction, much like Dragon Ball Z did with Dragon Ball's story. Either way, the gameplay looks super engaging, and the story sounds like it's going to be really interesting as well. And judging from the gameplay demo IGN release that was 13 minutes long, it looks like this game is really trying to earn that $60 price tag, which makes me super excited to purchase this game day one and figure out all the cool secrets on my own. The only reason I'm not even more excited for this game is because, like I said, I'm not that big of a fan of Souls-likes, and the only Souls game I even got relatively halfway through was Sekiro, but then I had to re-download stuff on my computer and I had to reinstall its files, and obviously I lost my save because of that. But even with all that being said, this game just looks like too much fun for me not to be excited about it, and the boss fights look like they're going to be genuinely challenging to complete, and I feel like we've had a lack of great boss design in recent years. So now let's move on to the next game I'm super excited for, or rather the next remaster that I'm super excited for.
War. War never changes.
Alright, so this game hasn't actually been confirmed yet, but was leaked by a hacker, and the leaks seem to be legitimate, so I'm putting it on this list. Basically, Bethesda is more than likely going to remaster or re-release Fallout 3 this year. Now, yes, like I said in the beginning, this hasn't actually been confirmed, but apparently a hacker found leaked court documents for it in Bethesda/Microsoft systems. Court documents aren't usually faked for no reason, and they're also usually not created for no reason. So there more than likely is going to be a Fallout 3 remaster coming out this year, or at least sometime soon. At the very least, I expect it to be announced this year, because again, trademark copyright claims aren't usually filed for no reason, and that's what those court documents were, at least to my knowledge. I'm saying all this up front because without all these caveats, this would easily be my most anticipated game of 2024. See, I really liked Fallout 3. Yes, it's not as good as Fallout New Vegas, which pretty much everyone considers to be the best game ever made, but it had a unique setting that both made you want to explore it, whilst also making you slightly scared to do so, even though you kinda had to in order to find good loot and gear in order to help you out with the main storyline. Now, the core documents didn't fully specify if it was a remaster or a remake, but even if it is just a remaster, I think it would be pretty easy to include some of Fallout 4's popular mechanics, like its loot crafting system and its shooting mechanics, because those are just good quality of life features that I'd argue Fallout 3 really could benefit from. But even if it is just the same game again, I'm more than happy to replay it with a new coat of paint, since really graphics are the only thing I'd argue holding that game back from modern day players. That and the fact that you can't really play it on Steam anymore, which is another reason I'm more than convinced this is going to come out in 2024, because even though a bunch of other games win those core documents, Fallout 3 is the only one that you cannot currently play on Steam, and that hasn't really gotten re-released like Skyrim has for newer hardware. And unlike Elder Scrolls Oblivion, which is so old even the people currently recreating it in Skyrim's engine had to port its source code when it first released almost in order to start working on it way back when, Fallout 3 is still relatively modern enough, at least I assume it is because GOG seems to have no problems running it, so I feel like it's the most likely remaster we're going to get, because those court documents also hinted at an Oblivion remaster/remake, and a new Doom game. But again, Fallout 3 feels like the only one that's more than likely going to happen because of all of what I just mentioned. It not being widely available on Steam, it not really being widely available on newer consoles, and it genuinely needing some new quality of life update features make me more than convinced that this remaster is going to happen, which again is why it's on this list. Now I know some people, myself included, aren't currently big fans of Bethesda at the moment because of a certain recent release that hasn't been doing very well. But honestly, if you just remaster the graphics of Fallout 3, throw in the shooting mechanics from Fallout 4 and its loot crafting system, then you've basically remastered Fallout 3. It's really not that hard to do, so I honestly can't see how Bethesda can screw this one up. And unlike Starfield, this game had a far smaller and more intricate open world that was genuinely fun to explore. So for those of you that haven't played it before and have heard some of the negative press release about Starfield, don't worry. Fallout 3 is nothing like that game. It has a great atmosphere and fun side quests that really help you feel engrossed in the world. And like I said, this should be an easy layup to remaster. You really only need to do those two things I just mentioned and bundle in all the DLC with the remaster. Again, this might not technically be a fair one to count, but I feel more than certain that we're going to hear something about this game in 2024, and I'm certainly excited for it, so I decided to put it on this list. Now with all that out of the way, let's move on to some honorable mentions before we close out this video with my number 1 most anticipated game of 2024. Alright, so the first honorable mention I want to talk about before we get to my number 1 anticipated game of 2024 is GTA 6. Honestly, who isn't hyped for this game? It's being made by a famous developer that has almost never produced a bad game, and is part of a great long-running series. Honestly, even though I'm not a huge fan of cutscene-heavy games, and still haven't gotten around to playing some of the older GTAs like 4, 3, and Vice City, I'm still really looking forward to running around in GTA 6 tactics and getting that 5 or 6 star wanted level whilst fighting off waves of enemies. Honestly, the only real thing I'm worried about even a little bit regarding this game is the fact that I know that some of the old writers who wrote GTA 5, 4, and 3 parted ways with Rockstar. Now, apparently they did finish up the script before leaving, or at least that's the general rumor going around. So I think GTA 6 will still have a pretty good story, but even if it doesn't, I'm more curious to see how it handles the open world aspects, because GTA 5 was really ahead of its time. Like, really ahead of its time. Seriously, even modern day game releases like Cyberpunk 2077 and Spider-Man 2018 can't even come close to matching up to the amount of features GTA 5 had at release way back in 2013. So I'm curious to see how Rockstar one-ups themselves this time around, especially because the open world genre has kind of stagnated a bit in recent years. Yes, Elden Ring is a great game, but aside from that, there are not too many open world games pushing the boundaries in my opinion, at least not in the way GTA 5 did way back when. So I wonder what new features Rockstar implements in GTA 6 that'll become the standard. Will they allow you to create your own crime syndicate, or maybe bring back some of the old GTA style missions, like being able to help the police like you could in some of the older GTA games, except reworking it a bit, where instead of having to steal their cars, you could just volunteer to help them as a kind of vigilante hitman, or pull in people that are breaking their parole. Who knows? I just know that I'm super excited to get a chance to play this game, and I know for a fact this is going to be a day one purchase for me. The only other thing I'm really worried about that I feel I should mention here is the fact that I just know GTA 6 is going to set the internet ablaze, because even the trailer for the game set off some of the snowflakes online whose jobs seem to hinge off creating some kind of unnecessary drama about something that doesn't really matter that much. But I'm not too worried about it, because I've already been through this rodeo with GTA 5, and I doubt Rockstar is going to start kowtowing to these people. So far so good. The only other thing I'm upset about for this game is the fact that the PC port probably isn't going to come out till like 2026 or something, and I'm primarily a PC player, so I'm not going to get to try this game out till at least 2026. Sucks, but hey, I'm still hyped for it. Now let's move on to another honorable mention that I'll play in the meantime, while I wait for GTA 6 to come to my PC. The Witcher 4.
Evil is evil. Lesser, greater, middling, makes no difference. The degree is arbitrary, the definition's blurred. If I'm to choose between one evil and another, I'd rather not choose at all.
Like I mentioned earlier on in this video, The Witcher 3 is what really got me into gaming, specifically story-heavy games. So naturally I'm curious to see what CD Projekt Red does with the series in Witcher 4. Now, this game is a long ways off, yet I'm still hyped to play it all the same, because I believe CD Projekt Red can deliver. One of the reasons The Witcher 3 has stuck with me for as long as it has is because of the unique way Geralt is portrayed by the game. You have to use your Witcher senses just like Geralt does in the books in order to track down monsters, and once you figure out what kind of monster it is you're hunting, you have to look it up in the bestiary and start crafting supplies in order to take it down, and drink certain potions and elixirs to make you more powerful against it, just like Geralt does in the books because he is a Witcher. Even the dialogue options reflect this. They're not just arbitrary good or bad / what do you the player want to do. They're options that feel like the Geralt of the books could potentially do, and are somewhat debatable amongst fans of the novels to this day. Yes, not all of the choices are like this, but there are still a couple of choices that'll really make you pause and go, what would Geralt do in this situation? And that's just such a unique way of role-playing that I've honestly never really experienced before, and still haven't really experienced. Whilst other games have slowly started to copy this method of role-playing, none of them really do it quite as well in my opinion. Even Cyberpunk 2077, CDPR's next game after Witcher 3, wasn't quite able to capture this magic, mainly because V was stuck in this weird, he's the player's avatar, but also his own own character dilemma that never really got resolved in my opinion. I never really felt like I was fully in control of V at all times, like I would be in a game like Fallout for instance. But at the same time, he wasn't a very fully fleshed out character in his own right the way Geralt was. I'm sure a lot of that's thanks to the books, although since I still haven't gotten around to reading them yet, I'm not gonna say that for certain. All I can say is that this method of role-playing should really be applied to more games. Imagine if in the next Spider-Man game, you got two options that reflected how Spider-Man has been written throughout the years. Like, one of them was how Spider-Man acted in the 60s, / how Stan Lee would have written that situation, and one of them is written like the way Dan Slott writes his modern-day Spider-Man stories, and thus would be the option more modern-day fans would take. It's such a cool idea and unique way of representing a character and their long history without having to exposit it all up front beforehand. It lets you, the player, decide how this character would act, and if you're not familiar with that character, well, you can decide for yourself. It's such a cool system that I'm really curious to see how they evolve in The Witcher 4. But one thing about The Witcher 3 that I really hope they change up in Witcher 4 is the combat. Sadly, it wasn't as great as the rest of the game. If they really want to focus on making Geralt seem like an expert swordsman, then I think that they should take a page out of FromSoft's handbook and copy the Sekiro parry system, and have Geralt use that against more human enemies, whilst maintaining the whole dodge roll mechanic against monsters. That way the player really feels like an expert swordsman going up against these basic bandits and thugs, whilst also feeling a little vulnerable against monsters, because even Geralt, a highly trained witcher, needs to be careful when approaching monsters. And while I think the Witcher 3 dodge roll mechanic works well at representing that aspect, I never felt like I was a super badass swordsman in control of the situation, at least not till I leveled up more. But who knows, maybe that's just me. Maybe everyone else is hoping for the exact same combat from The Witcher 3. At least we can all agree that Gwent definitely should be in The Witcher 4, exactly how it was in Witcher 3, because I don't really like the newer version that much. Please CD Projekt Red, give me back classic Gwent. I want to play it so bad. More than I even want Witcher 4 if I'm being honest. But anyways guys, that's gonna wrap up the honorable mentions section. Let's move on to the number one game I'm most excited for that's coming out in 2024. Shall we?
He is no mere titan. He is time itself, and time cannot be stopped.
Wait for me, Father. I'll be this.
I was a big fan of the first Hades game, and really enjoyed the movement, combat, and variety of choices on how to approach the game. You could choose to grab a sword and try and upgrade it fully by acquiring more Titan blood by beating the main bosses, or you could pick up the Aegis shield and start bull rushing people. Really the only downside to Hades 1 was, and this is just my opinion here, the fact that the godly boons weren't that great to start off with, so you pretty much had to grab tons of nectar and kiss up to the god with the best boons in order to make their boons actually worthwhile, which kind of hurts the replayability of the game in my opinion, as you have to figure out which boons you really want early on and then save up for them whilst building up your character. But honestly, that's such a small nitpick that even if the second game does have this same flaw, I'm still going to enjoy playing it, assuming of course that the second game has the same amount of variety in weapon choice and in character skills that the first game had. Aside from all that, the thing that really got me interested in the second game was the main villain, Kronos, the Titan of Time. I remember him from my days of reading Percy Jackson books and learning a little about Greek mythology in the process, and from what I know, he sounds like the perfect villain for the second game, because the first game was all about beating the god named Hades, but Kronos is a Titan, which makes him so far above Hades that he literally has him imprisoned in the trailer. So far it seems like they're doing him justice, which makes me really excited to see what he's like in the story. Plus, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if all else fails, I think the combat will still be enjoyable based on what I've seen in the trailer. Man, I don't know what it is about 2D action games like this, but they always hit better than the 3D ones in my opinion, as it feels so much better jumping from one opponent to the next in quick and brutal fashion. And even though we only saw a couple weapons in the trailer, if they can keep the fast-paced combat and unique enemy designs and encounters from the first game, then I think this will be at least as good as the first one. And I'm already certain it's going to be better than the first one based on Supergiant's track record of releasing games. And if there's any game on this list that I'm definitely going to buy day one, it's this one, because I know it'll be good. Well, these are all the games I'm most hyped for in 2024, but what games are you guys looking forward to? Leave them down in the comment sections below, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, leave a like and subscribe, because I leave up polls for new video ideas pretty often, so you guys will get to vote on more gaming videos if that's what you want to see. That's all for now, guys. See you guys in my next upload.